Good afternoon, welcome to Northumberland Zoo on YouTube. My name is Maxine and I work here. Thank you so much for tuning in. Now I'm back in the crayfish room again because I want to give you a really exciting update. A little continuation from our crayfish story last week, which I thought was fascinating. I want to show you how our wild caught females are getting on and show you a little bit more about the setup and what we've got going on down here in the British Wildlife Building.
So now we've got these females in and we're on like daily watches to see if the hatchlings have hatched. It's basically quite a delicate time. We like to check them every single day. It's really handy that we can see them underneath the tanks as well, because that's really helpful. We don't have to pick up the female, because if you handle the female, she can actually flick her tail and she can flick all the eggs and the hatchlings off as well, which we obviously don't want. There is also a risk that they can eat their own babies. So when they have babies on them, on the underside of their tail, they produce a hormone which inhibits the female's appetite, and basically she just doesn't eat throughout that period. Also, the kind of feeling of the eggs and the hatchling on the underside of her tail is a really good indicator to her as well that she still has babies and not to go eating them or even hunting for her own food. So we're going to be looking at them every single day, morning and evening, to see if they've hatched, if they're at stage 1, if they're at stage 2. Stage 2 basically means they look like tiny little crayfish. They've got fully formed tails. Because when they get to stage 2, they're going to start actually coming off their mum. And when they start coming off their mum, the hormone that she produces to inhibit her appetite and stops her from eating her own babies, she won't be producing that anymore, and there is a risk that she can eat them. So really, really close observations every single day to see what stage the hatchlings are at. So we're at the stage now where almost all of the crayfish hatchlings have come off the mum's tail and they're all kind of wandering around her, which is really nice to see. But we're at that really delicate stage now where we need to remove the female before she actually starts potentially eating her own offspring. It looks like there's only a few left on, so what we're going to do is we're going to get her out, we're going to check under her tail. If she's still got quite a few on, like 10 or more, then we'll leave her because it's not quite ready. But if she's got less than that, then what we'll probably do is just really gently knock them off into the water, and then we'll remove the female. Definitely not got any on her now. We've separated the females out now into these tanks up here, away from the hatchlings, just to prevent the mums from eating the babies. And they're going to do about a 3-month period of isolation, just to check that they're really healthy and fit enough to go out to the wild. But what's really important in that time is they have to molt. They haven't molted since before they laid their eggs, so they're going to be really desperate to molt. So once that's happened and we can check that they're really healthy, we'll put them back into the river where they came from. When they molt their exoskeleton, because they have skeletons on the outside rather than the inside like we do, they actually eat it because it's really, really nutritious. It's full of minerals, it's really good for them. It's kind of like us eating cheese and drinking milk. It's good for your bones. So we leave the molts in there, and if they're on their own, that's great. The crayfish will just eat its own molt and it will get all that goodness. Sometimes when they're in groups, they often fight over them, which is quite fun to watch actually. So in the large middle tanks of each layer is where we've got the hatchlings. So that's where the mums were initially with the eggs on them. That's where they've hatched out, and we've actually just left them in those clutch groups for now because they're so tiny that they're not like fighting for resources or space or anything at this stage. The hatchlings do grow at different rates depending on how much food they get. So, because you get sort of stronger ones and weaker ones, just like you do with any animal group. So when they start getting noticeably bigger, we'll split them up into like size groups, so larger ones, smaller ones. And they're going to move into all these other tanks in the system surrounding it. The 3 mums are in these tanks here, just the waiting period until they're ready to go back to the wild. So normally our crayfish routine is we clean out any old food waste that's in there every day, which doesn't take that long really, and then we do water changes twice a week. However, the baby crayfish is a lot more intense. We are feeding them live food, which is really important for their initial development when they're so young. And that live food is producing waste as well, because it is like tiny little animals, so it makes the water dirty. So we're having to do 50% water changes every day, and it takes the keepers about 2 hours a day to maintain the crayfish now. So it is a big job, but it's definitely worth it.
So even though the hatchlings are 8 weeks old, it's still very early days. This is our first time actually rearing small baby crayfish. The little crayfish, they're just in here. You can see them kind of running around in there. We've got quite a few. And they're just identical to the adult ones. They're just absolutely tiny. And some of them are hiding out in the refuge, and some of them are obviously quite confident and hanging out on the outside. But we're really, really pleased for our first ever time. I can't believe that we weren't too late. Even Ian from the Environment Agency was blown away by the fact that we managed to catch buried females in the beginning of June. So this is great. The process of keeping them is super complicated, obviously with the feeding system. This is the setup now. It's developed a little bit since we first started. So we've actually got 4 different pots here, and each pot is at a different stage. So we have to make sure that we've always got food ready to feed out to those babies. Because like we said, trying to feed dead food to a brand new hatchling whose instinct is to hunt live food is very tricky. So we have to hatch out our own live food in here. Each one of these has its own heater. So those big tubes, those are heaters. So these are actually like 28 degrees. They're nice and toasty warm. And that's the temperature that the eggs will hatch out at. So they take about 24 hours to hatch. And then once they've hatched, we clean them out, because obviously once they're alive, there's then thousands of things in there pooping. So as stage 1 of the process of about to feed out this live food, the keepers turn the light off in the crayfish room and put a little torch on the back of this. And what happens there is it attracts the live food to the bottom of the bottle. And all of up here, you can see all of this muck is kind of egg casings and poop and all kinds of stuff, and all of that floats. So what we want to be able to do is drain this bottle out, get as much of the live food in the actual jug, and then we're left with just the scum in the bottle so we don't waste the live food. We have to add salt to this because these are saltwater animals. So we have salt to add to these. So this lot today will be getting fed out. So these ones need to be cleaned first, then they'll be put into a brand new thing. We'll give them some food, which is this one, spirulina. So we'll put a tiny little teaspoon of spirulina in there. And then once that water is clear, we know that all of those little things have eaten it, so it's in their bellies. So basically that makes this food a lot more nutritious to feed to our crayfish. Because obviously none of this stuff has had its first meal yet either, so therefore it's much more nutritious if it has its own meal before we feed it to them. It's very complicated. It's called gut loading. So these guys will get fed this morning, and then by this afternoon it'll be ready to drain them out, rinse them, obviously try and wash all of the salt off of them before we then go and feed our little hungry babies. But these baby crayfish are not on show as such. We are in the British Wildlife Building, but you are not going to be able to see the babies because they're in that rack at the back there. But as they grow over the next year and a half, because that's how long we've got them for, they will start to spread out along these tanks here, so you will start to see them through the windows. But of course, if you want to do like a zookeeper experience or something like that and come behind the scenes and you want to see our crayfish setup, then of course you can request that as well. Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed that update, and remember to find the links in the description to learn more about crayfish and what you can do for our native species. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Northumberland Zoo channel, and I shall see you next week.